This episode is brought to you by MGM Plus. From and its Horrors returns for season 4, centered around a town that traps all those who enter. Terrifying creatures that come out at night. Horrors some wished had stayed buried. Where desperate hope leads to darker truths. Dangerous new arrivals, a sinister figure, a shocking revelation. From season 4 premieres April 19th on MGM Plus. Some doors should remain closed.
Red Apple Audio Network's Another Side of Midnight with Walter Sterling and Michelle Gibson. Michelle Gibson is an expert, a researcher, an academic on alternative history. Alternative history. There are multiple parallel histories, but there are two big ones. The one that you and I were taught in public elementary schools and were taught all of our lives. And then there's the other history that you and I can see with our eyes, that we can hear with our ears, that we can look at and go, well, I can see that this is different than what I'm being told. And at the moment, I am fascinated by something Michelle Gibson has brought to my attention, which is, hey, look around at the downtowns of many cities in America, particularly in the North. There are buildings that were built in or founded in the 1850s, 1860s that don't seem to match the architecture of all of the buildings built since. These are buildings with 20-foot-high entranceways in the front. These are buildings with elaborate, complex, beautiful statuary, moldings, awnings, roofs that are like, well, how come we don't build like that today? Why aren't we building like that now? And wait, they told us these were built in 1880? Well, in 1880, those buildings were surrounded by dirt roads, and the construction crews came to work on horse-drawn carriages or just horses. How the heck did those guys build those? And Michelle Gibson has done a tremendous amount of research into all of this, and she's also an expert on my favorite topic, which is a country that has disappeared. Yes, an entire country, half the size of China, with outposts around the world called Tartaria. And Michelle, you pick it up any point there that you want, anything you'd like to share with us on the things that I just mentioned.
Yes, thank you for that intro and the information. And there's just so many directions to go in, because the bottom line is what we're taught in school and what's all around us literally doesn't match, like you're saying. And it's in the big cities and it's in the small towns. Courthouses, libraries, Carnegie libraries. It doesn't matter where you are, not only in North America, but around the world. The hand of design is the same, and it's best known as Tartaria. And from what I've been able to determine, Tartaria was originally like China, Russia, Japan, Korea, that part of the world. And there were different empires around the earth with an R sound in them, like Barbaria. You know, we hear of barbarian being the opposite of civilized. But Barbaria was the name of Africa, North Africa. And you can find that R sound, Armenia, Arkansas, Arizona. Places all over the world have an R sound. And so I think that civilization was worldwide. I think Atlantis sank recently. What we're told happened thousands of years ago. This was the same civilization, empires within empire that weren't fighting against each other, but were co-creating this beautiful civilization. And we're still living in these buildings today and working and, you know, writing their infrastructure, like subways and streetcars and trains, though it's nothing like it was up until something happened that wiped this civilization off the face of the earth that we have not been taught about. And we've been given a version of history that's watered down, sanitized, doesn't include any of this. We hear about suffering and war and disease and all these horrible things that have happened. But this civilization that we're talking about was nothing like that. It was beautiful. It was harmonious. And it was connected by this the ley lines and the energy grid that was powered by free energy. And you see this in the beautiful spires of cathedrals and any building from this period of time. And in many cases, the spires have been taken down. And they used to have a purpose on this grid. And there's footage of airships, and you can see giant airships docking like on top of the Empire State Building in New York. Just one example. There's a lot. And we lost airships in the narrative with the Hindenburg. It's too dangerous. Can't go that way. But it would seem that airships were part of this civilization. And there are bird's eye view maps online that you can find of cities and towns, let's say in the United States, and you'll see them from above, what you would see if you were in a plane, but they're from the 1860s, 1870s, 1880s, like you said. And so this information is missing from collective awareness, and it's thankfully starting to come back. I got interested into my life pulled me in that direction, but it seems like this is a time when a lot of people are starting to do their own research and starting to look into this and putting a lot of good information out, especially on YouTube and other platforms, to get this back into the public eye so the public can become more aware of what we're talking about.
Michelle Gibson, an expert on alternative history. Michelle, who put an end to it? Who conspired to put an end to this glorious age of human history? And by the way, I've always thought that electrical connection, the wireless connection, house to house to house, I've always thought that's what they call lightning rods. Those weren't lightning rods. Mm-hmm. Those were ways for those homes to connect to an energy grid, because they stopped building homes with lightning rods, but there's no end to lightning. Therefore, we should still all have lightning rods, but we don't. Only the homes that were built before about 1900 have lightning rods. Must have been used for something else.
And there's other things that fall in that category. I'll answer your question to the best of my ability in just a moment about who, but even fireplaces. Fireplaces would appear to have had a very different purpose than putting logs on andirons and lighting them, because it's so many homes at that period of time, and a lot of them were occupied by elite people of the day, have these beautiful fireplaces with tiles and andirons that look like they should be in an art museum. And, we're told they were, in our narrative, people needed that for warmth and used logs to accomplish that. So there's different aspects of this free energy grid and the architecture, how buildings were designed and so forth to facilitate this transfer of energy. And it's a very deep topic. But I think, in my opinion, something happened relatively recently, far more recently than we can imagine. I think it involved a time manipulation. And I think it allowed a dark force to come into the earth and incarnated in human form. In many cases, I'm sure we're dealing with non-physical darkness as well, but physical darkness look like us, sound like us, but don't act like us. And I think they are the biggest names, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Carnegies, the Vanderbilts, the Morgans. They were the captains of industry that brought about this industrial world that we know of, the only thing we know about, because they turned the components of this energy grid, the iron, the copper, the coal, they turned that into the fuel that they needed when this energy grid was taken down, until they could get it up and running to the best of their ability. So like streetcars and things like that which would have functioned with the free energy. They first got them going with horses and mules, and then they figured out how to get it electrified in the 1880s. So 1850s, we got horses pulling streetcars. 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, we're starting to get electrified streetcar systems. And then within the next 20, 30, 40 years, they took these electric streetcars away when they had cars and buses to replace all the streetcars that were everywhere, and highways and gasoline.
Michelle,
and
right, Michelle.
So they needed to power it differently. So I'm just kind of laying out that the biggest names in our history that we all know, that we all learn about, that have everything named after them, are the ones that were behind at least the physical aspect of what happened here.
Michelle Gibson,
go ahead.
How do we find you on YouTube?
You can find me at Michelle Gibson 8946.
Michelle Gibson 8946, expert on alternative history, always brings us fascinating information and makes me just sit back and be quiet and think. Wow. Michelle Gibson, thank you for being on another side of Midnight with Walter Sterling on the Red Apple Audio Network. Thank you.